Hello and welcome back. So for those who haven't seen my previous video, the Vintage Cube is now on Magic Arena. And from Magic Arena we have 17 lands which can collect data for us and give us insights about card win rates and things like that. Archetype breakdowns, all this awesome and exciting stuff. So I talked about it quite a bit in the video I previously just uploaded. And in that video I was talking about there's all this data that I wish that I had, because if you look at this breakdown you only have win rate when the card is in your hand, opening, or drawn. And I was talking about really like that's a very limiting metric because there's a lot of things wrong with just measuring how much you win when you draw the card. For example, like Tellurian Academy, you build your whole deck around an artifact synergy, and you win 60% of the time when you draw Tellurian Academy. But how often do you win when you don't draw Tellurian Academy? That was the question I had. And so you can watch that video if you want, but this video I'm going to go much more in depth because there's so much data that we have that I didn't know that I had if you go to the table view. Because now you can see what's the win rate when you play it in your deck, what's the win rate if you never draw it, and what's the win rate, how much better does it get if it actually shows up in your hand relative to not showing up in your hand. So there's a lot more information here, and we can go really deep on the data. So I'm very excited about that. This one's prettier, but if you missed that first video, the TLDR is that Boros is the best deck by such a significant margin. There's also this. So let's just do an archetype breakdown first and foremost. So this is cube-powered Premier Draft for the first week. And I talked a lot about the limitations of data collection and stuff. Brief overview here. This is the first week of metagame, so stuff can totally shift. So the data we're seeing here might change next week, might change the week after that. That's one thing. The second thing is we have quite a bit of data, but statistical significance requires even more data than this. So even if the metagame doesn't shift, we might see some subtle shifts. As more players play games, we get more information on the metagame and things like that. So that being said, take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt, and we're going to track how this data changes over time. But for now, we're working with what we got, and my goodness. So apparently people have played colorless decks in Vintage Cube, which is very impressive. But the win rate breakdown, monocolor in general, 55% win rate. Two color, 55.5. So monocolor overperforming two color, three color, five color. So that's interesting. Another thing worth mentioning, all decks, 54.3%. So the 17 lands data collection is like an opt-in process. And so the players who opt in, on average, seem to have a higher win rate than average. So basically anything below 54% win rate is underperforming, and anything above 50% win rate is overperforming. With that, let's get in the deck. So mono white, 62% win rate. That's extraordinarily high. Mono blue, 53%. Mono black, 50%. So mono black is the worst performing color pair in the cube. Now, there's only 943 games played, so we definitely want more statistics to see like the difference between mono black and mono green. Not that many people play mono black. So just worth mentioning that. But yeah, the best mono white, followed by mono red, followed by blue, then green, then black. If you go into two color pairs, Boros is outperforming everything by a huge margin. I think the next best is Gruul and Orzhov. Yeah, right? Gruul, Orzhov, Rakdos, Azorius. Yeah, but Boros is crushing it. Gruul next best, Orzhov, Rakdos, and then Azorius. Dimir is quite bad. The worst color pairing is Golgari, which is actually very surprising, but it makes sense because green and black have the lowest overall win rates in the cube so far. Three color, what are we looking at? The best one is Naya, which is my favorite color pairing. The worst three color pairing by a huge margin is Obzon, green, white, black, which is interesting because that's also one of my favorites. And then four color, it gets less and less useful the more colors you look at. But basically, Boros is dominating. Mono red, mono white, like their win rates are so much higher than anything else. It's very impressive. Now we get to go to the table data, and this has so much more insight compared to this. So this, what I talked about last time, is the win rate of the cards when you draw them. But there's a lot of cards that I was talking about specifically, actually, like Tinker and Flash, that I was really curious what's the overall archetype win rate. And you can actually see that. So if we go to table, we can see what's the win rate from played in deck. Let's find Flash. Because that's the card I was very curious about. Flash, when played in your deck, 52.1%. So that is below the average win rate, which was around 54%. So Flash is an underperforming card because when you don't see Flash, let's put Ever in Hand in here as well. Find Flash. Yeah, so Flash, in your deck in general, the average win rate of Flash is 52.1%. When it's in your hand, your win rate is 57%, which is very high. But when you don't see the card, the win rate of these decks is 46%. So this thing here, IIH, Improvement in Hand, is actually really interesting because basically what this is telling you is cards that on their own are really busted, but they're in a bad archetype because the archetype doesn't function without this card. So Flash is a great example. Underworld Breach, this tells you Storm is pretty bad, but if you draw Breach, you're going to win the game. What's another example? So anyway, Flash underperforms. It's a below average card. It's slightly better than Avacyn's Pilgrim in terms of like win rate. But Avacyn's Pilgrim is basically the same if you draw it versus if you don't draw it, which means the archetype and the card are kind of matched. Whereas with Flash, Flash is the archetype. If you draw Flash, you're winning modest amount. So like if you could just put Flash in your opening hand every time in a Flash archetype, it would be a good card. But the problem is you can't do that, and you have to play all these bad cards to support Flash. And so the overall win rate of the archetype is below average. Flash is around as good as Avacyn's Pilgrim, Gaia's Cradle, that kind of thing. Tinker, I think, is very similar. Thinker. This was another card that I was looking at the day and I really wanted to see. Yeah, Tinker is... Wow. Tinker is worse than Tireless Tracker in terms of game played win rate. So Tinker, overall 51.2%. If you draw it, 58% win rate. It's such a good card in the archetype if you draw it. But if you don't draw Tinker, it's a 45% win rate. So you're playing all of these cards to support your archetype that, they can't win unless you have Tinker. And playing decks like this leads to an overall worse win rate. So I feel a little vindicated because I've been saying this for a long time. But if we look at the cards' game played win rate, it's like all of the top cards are Boros. Let's just go down. Deathgleader's Champion. We can see color, right? Let's look for the first non-white, red, or white-red card. These are white and red lands. White-red, white-red land, red land, white-red, white-red, white-red land. That's a white-red land. Caracas is a white land. Like, literally all of the top win rate cards are Boros, and it's not even close. Elegant Parlor, I think is... What is this? White-red? Yep, white-red. That makes sense. White, 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 red. So the Makti is actually one of the highest, not purely white or red win rate card. It's blue. Skullclamp is winning quite a bit. And I actually am surprised by this. Skullclamp does tend to overperform other cards. I've been low on this card in the past, but the data is supporting it as one of the better cards that, I guess it's colorless. But it is winning more than, I think, even more than GT. So Skullclamp I think I was low on, but maybe this card is just busted and I should play it more. Smuggler's Copter, really good. But anyway, we're looking for non-white and red cards because that's a red card. Arid Mace is the white-red fetch. Unholy Heat, white-red. Mox Pearl is the white-red. I mean, GT has the same win rate as Black Lotus. So there's that. But it is worth mentioning Black Lotus has an insane game-in-hand win rate versus game-played win rate. And GT actually has a negative game-in-hand win rate versus game-played win rate. So that means that basically the archetypes GT is good in, GT underperforms in those archetypes. Now, there's a lot of reasons this could be. It's possible GT is a card that I'm overhyping. It's possible GT is a complicated card with a moderately high skill ceiling. So, some people could misplay it, some people could not. I think more data will be needed to tell because you can sort by how the top players are performing and the bottom players, but there's just not enough data right now to get information on that. So I'm vindicated in some areas, like Flash, all these 2-card combo decks are bad. It is possible that GT is worse than I'm giving it credit for. That being said, it has the same overall win rate as Black Lotus. So it might be worse, but it's as good as Black Lotus. So take something of that what you will. But I think a lot of that could be carried by the archetypes that GTA is played in. Whereas, like, if you look at percent of games played, when people draft GTA, 78% of the time they put it in their deck. Black Lotus goes in the deck 99% of the time. So in this case, like, we can see when you draw Black Lotus, you get a 7% win rate boost immediately. Whereas drawing GTA drops it. So anyway, enough about GTA. I love the card. It's possible I was wrong about how good it is, but I think we're just going to monitor this one and see how the win rate goes over time. I'm going to keep playing it because I do genuinely win a lot when I play it. So this could just be like a play style thing, but it could also be something else. We'll find out as more data comes in. Anyway, we're looking for the first non-white or red card. Red-green, so Minsk and Boo is the first non-white red card in the cube, and it's winning 56% of its games. This gets an 8.3% win rate boost from being in your hand. So Minsk and Boo, really good card. Carnage Interpreter. Okay, so Time Walk is winning 55% of the time. And if you draw it, it's winning 63% of the time. So again, Time Walk and Ancestral are actually very similar in terms of win rate, which is surprising. But overall, they're performing about as good as Strip Mine or Questing Druid. Slightly worse than like Carnage Interpreter, Wandering Emperor. And their game in hand win rate versus gameplay win rate is basically telling us when you draw Time Walk Ancestral, they're great. But the decks that play Time Walk and Ancestral are just average. And it seems like that's because you have to put blue mana in your deck. And the top like 120 cards aren't blue. Like nothing is even close to as good as the white and red aggressive cards. So basically, Ancestral Time Walk are good cards in a bad color. Yeah, we're still in the white cards aside from that. Some Fexing, Taiga, Bloodbraid Elf is like the, the highest win rate non-red white card. That is unbelievable to me, but pretty good. Duress being that high is interesting, but it's also not played that much. You can see Bloodbraid Elf was seen like 7,000 times. Duress was only seen 941, so this could be like not enough data. There, then we get some fetches. Blood Tithe Harvester has a 54% win rate. Blood Tithe Harvester has a higher win rate than Urza Saga Kavu. That's nuts to me. The highest win rate non-power blue card is Remand, which 54. If you play Remand 54% of the time, you're winning. But if we look at the average overall win rate, 54.3%. So Remand is basically just above an average win rate. In fact, we could look at what the average win rate is. Fire Covenant, Fractured Identity, Winds of Abandon, Ephemerate, Caustic Bronco. Dismember slightly below average. So it's like, of the cards in the cube that are winning consistently, this is over many games, like almost all of them are Boros. Because everything below this like 54.3% win rate is losing more games than it's winning relative to the 17 lands data, which is an average of 54.3% win rate. So I don't know what else to tell you. Boros is so much better than everything else. All of the top cards are Boros, besides specifically Ancestral Recall and Time Walk and Minsk and Boo. It's quite remarkable actually how unhinged this is. I'm gonna look at a couple more cards that I was interested in because I love like Deep Cavern Bat. You know, this card overall performs poorly, but when you draw it, it does well, which tells you this is a good card in kind of a bad archetype, which means like black is an underperforming color, but this is a good card in that color. Same with memory lapse and stuff like that. So let's look at some other cards I was curious about. Like sneak attack, right? People always said sneak attack's the best card ever. So wow, sneak attack's terrible. So the overall win rate of sneak attack is 49.3%, which is, just to put it in perspective, 49.3 is exactly 5% below the average. So if we scroll up here, the average is 54.3. So 59.3. Sneak attack is as far below the average win rate as like Reprieve, Fiery Confluence, Caracas, Solitude are above the average win rate. I'm just gonna put, where is he? Glorybringer somewhere in here. There he is. Yeah, Glorybringer. Slightly. Ooh, Nova Hellkite might actually be better than Glorybringer. It's really close. Nova Hellkite has a slightly higher game in hand win rate, so I could be wrong there. But anyway, Sneak Attack performed really, really poorly. 49% win rate, which is so far below the average. What are some other cards? Entomb. Entomb was 51.4%, so definitely below the average win rate. Obviously, the win rate goes up if you draw it. But the problem with cards like Entomb is the rest of the cards lower your win rate. And we can actually look at the win rate of like different reanimation targets. So like Atraxa. Decks running Atraxa have a 51.5% win rate overall, which is on par with like Phantasmal Image, Eternal Witness, Ignoble Hierarch. We could look at other reanimation targets. Gristlebrand. Wow, 49.1% for Gristlebrand. That is almost near the absolute bottom of the cube. What is the absolute bottom of the cube? Let's find out. The lowest card in the cube is, well, that kind of makes sense. Tendrils of Agony at 45% win rate. I think Tendrils Yawgmoth will makes the most sense to me because you're gonna have a bunch of like inexperienced Storm players playing it. I think as we get more data, we can see like top bottom players, and maybe this will go up. But currently, it's the worst. As I expected, like Channel Ulamog also channels like the worst. Almost one of the worst cards in the entire cube. Same with Emrakul. Show and Tell is really bad. What else are we looking at here? Oh, Tellurian Academy is an interesting one. Because Tellurian Academy, like the Artifacts deck, Tellurian Academy has one of the highest changes between when you draw it and when you don't draw it. So Tellurian decks, when they draw Tellurian Academy, are winning 60% of the time. When they don't draw Tellurian Academy, they're winning 45% of the time. Which means the artifact deck, or the archetype that it's a part of, is really bad. 45% is almost one of the lowest. In fact, I want to see what is the lowest. Games not seen win rate. So this is the cards that are just in like the worst archetypes. Tendrils of Agony makes sense. Channel makes sense. Ulamog, Show and Tell, Tinker, Tellurian Academy. So basically, what this is saying is the artifact. Well, there's a lot of things it's saying, right? Storm, when you don't draw Tendrils, you're gonna lose most of the time. Channel, Show and Tell, Emrakul, Ulamog. This is like one of the worst archetypes in the entire cube, because if you're not hitting your 2-card combos, you're just gonna lose. And then Tinker and Tellurian Academy fall into this pit too of like the artifacts deck on its own is quite poor, but it has these couple cards that are so broken they can push it above the rest. So like Academy and Tinker, they win quite a bit when you draw them, but when you don't draw them, the base archetype win rate is quite low. So that's actually really interesting. And then I think we go to the top. What are the best cards if you don't draw them? That tells you kind of what the archetype is. Like Goblin Bombardment, Glimmer Lens, Kumano Thesis Kakazan, that kind of thing. These are part of the best archetypes. I mean, you're not playing Goblin Bombardment in a deck that doesn't have a lot of creatures and is aggressive. So it's actually it's actually better to play a Goblin Bombardment deck and not draw Goblin Bombardment, because the base archetype is so strong, it's pushing it up above the rest. I do want to browse the visual just to get an idea of what else. Oh, Psychic Frog. I want to see Psychic Frog. Frog. Psychic Frog. Yeah, that's another great example. Psychic Frog overall 53.3% win rate. So blue-black on average has a pretty low win rate, but if you draw Psychic Frog, it has a 58.9% win rate. So this is a busted card holding up a bad archetype. Because 49, like when you don't draw Psychic Frog, you're only winning 49% of the time, which is well below average. And similar for like Narset, that kind of thing. What else do we want to see? I mean, the data is very clear. We need more information and the metagame can change, but like Boros is dominating. So like the red-white cards are so much better than everything else, and that could also displace some of the rest of the metagame. But I feel fairly vindicated with this data. Demonic Tutor has a 51% win rate. When you draw it, it's great, but the archetypes you played in underperform. I want to see what like Thoughtseize does. Thoughtseize performs better than Demonic Tutor. It is better when you draw it, and the base archetype is slightly below average, but not that much lower. What's interesting to me is Soul Ring even is like Soul Ring 55. So Soul Ring on average is good, but people play Soul Ring in bad archetypes for some reason. Because it's when you don't draw Soul Ring, your deck is below average, but you play it in decks that are above average. That's very interesting. Maybe people just put Soul Ring and then try and draft too many expensive cards. That could totally be the case. Let's look at Natural Order. This was a card, I believe Craterhoof Behemoth is in the Vintage Cube, but Natural Order game played win rate is only 50%, and game not seen win rate 48.3%. So I think definitively like a mono green deck is quite poor. I mean, we could even see it here, right? Mono green 51.3%, quite low win rate overall. But if you add red to it, suddenly 55%, you're like one of the highest performing archetypes because green's a good enabler. And if you go to Naya even, which is what I love playing, 57%, Naya is the highest winning color pair. What's interesting to me too, if you go into 4-color, not blue is the highest performing 4-color pair, whereas not red is the worst performing. And not blues tend to be where I am, although again, there's not a ton of data for these, only 205 games for not blue. So take that with a grain of salt. Anyway, I could ramble about this forever. Let me know if you want to see more, but I think this is enough chat about the format given the quantity of information we have. Boros is busted. I feel quite vindicated. Oh, I want to see what Manatithe is. Let's go. Like my pet cards. Manatithe. Manatithe is 58% base win rate. It's actually lower win rate when you don't draw it. This could be, again, like a different like player skill thing. Like people could draw it and then hold it up too much, not win with it. Hard to say necessarily, but this basically tells you Manatithe. Where's like Spell Pierce? Manatithe is winning 58% of the games. Decks playing Manatithe are winning 58% of their games. Decks playing Spell Pierce are winning 52% of their games. I want to see Remand. This will be really telling. Decks playing Remand are winning 54% of their games. And let's look at Reprieve. Yeah, decks playing Reprieve are winning 59% of their games. So basically, Reprieve being in white instead of blue makes it like more than 10% stronger than Remand, which is it's incredible. Anything else I want to see? I talked about GT, Strip Mine. Yep, Strip Mine, 55% win rate, so just above average, which is very impressive for like a colorless card. Dismember is just barely below average, which seems like taking damage can come back to haunt you. Anyway, I could talk about this forever. Yeah, this is the takeaway for now. Boros is busted. Preliminarily, it seems like I was correct about 2-card combos being bad. All the Reanimate, Sneak Attack, Tinker, Artifacts decks are underperforming. But this is only week 1. We definitely need more data. And this is like the community hasn't quite had time to adapt to the metagame yet. Like it could be you have all of these experienced players forcing Boros, absolutely crushing it, and just beating up on all these players who've never played Vintage Cube in their life before. That's definitely a possibility, and we're gonna have to wait and see when more data comes in. If that's the case, if these win rates hold, if things shift, and I'll keep you updated. I'll check probably every couple of weeks for the next couple of weeks, and we'll see what's up. But in the meantime, draft Boros, keep crushing it. If you like this, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.